Okay, we are back to talk about Homicide, Life on the Street, the entirety of season two, 4 episodes. Again, Homicide, Life on the Street, created by Paul Attanasio, based on David Simon's book, Homicide, A Year on the Killing Streets. This entire season aired in January 1994 during a break for the show LA Law. So it aired all 4 episodes that month. And in season two, it consists of episodes revolving around several murders in the Baltimore area, including a tourist mother shot in front of her family, a police shooting of a small-time drug dealer, father-son assisted suicide, a man killed over a $1.49 pen, among many others. Detective Bolander befriends and begins dating a waitress who will be someone that stands out in television in later years. Detective Munch is always lonely and depressed about his love life, and the detectives, all of them, forced to take sensitivity training with a therapist. Yes, so we get into
hmm
a interesting 4 episodes for some kind of a struggle to get it back. But even right off the bat, as we watch this season, if you go to Peacock and pull it up, we have some more of these episode out of order shenanigans based on what happened back in 1994,
Yeah, and I
where
guess
if
we should.
you, yeah,
I
the
guess we should.
episode you see last was the
mhm.
episode that they aired first back in 1994.
Right, and then I guess we should start with talking about that kind of stuff behind the scenes, what was going on. Um, First season of the show, critically acclaimed, Emmy nominated, maybe even won an Emmy or two.
It did win. It did win
Uh,
one, nominated 4 times, won one. Yes.
yeah, won an Emmy, and so, but NBC is like, we're not so sure. The ratings aren't great.
Hmm.
Um, we'll give you this shot. We're going to give you a 4 episode order to fill in the hiatus in LA Law or whatever, I guess, basically. And then, as we discussed briefly last week, I think it was, they also, the executives had some notes that
Hmm.
they had to follow where they wanted less storylines per episode. Um, they wanted there to be not so many quick cuts, I
Yeah.
guess.
Yeah. There are a lot of hard
Um,
hard cuts in between, even things within scenes that they wanted to do away with. Yep.
and also they added more color
Yes. Less bleak.
just to make it a little less bleak, get some more
Yeah.
color in there. And I think there was also some note about, well, yeah, I don't know, like they wanted more about the personal lives of the characters or more to like flesh out the characters, which I found reading that quite interesting because I started watching the first episode and I was like, oh, these don't feel like the same people. Why is everyone an asshole? So,
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
you
Yeah.
felt that way too?
Yeah, I did.
Um,
I did feel that way. I felt that there was a sense of, okay, we've been told to change these characters somewhat to where, yes, we have fewer stories, and so we focus on one particular A story plus what's happening with the detectives, as opposed to 3 or 4 different murders, and we're going to really intersperse some things at moments we can about these characters.
yeah. So, I mean, really, throughout the first episode, I was very unhappy.
Hmm.
And kind of thinking to myself, like, man, I'm gonna have to go on the podcast and talk about how much I hate what they did to this show. What's going on?
Yep.
Everyone in the world says it's a good show, and clearly they don't mean just the first season, you know? Um, so actually, Ryan, you mentioned this, right? Another note the
Hmm.
executives made, they said, okay, we think that you should we're gonna air Bop Gun first.
Hmm.
We think it'll do better in the ratings. Robin Williams is in it. We'll put Bop Gun first. I agree. They were correct. Top Gun should have been first, and the fact that they put them back in the order that was originally intended is, I think, a mistake.
I agree. I think part of the reason they made this decision was clearly they wanted ratings to be up, and they had months to publicize that the show is coming back. Robin Williams is going to guest star. A lot of effort went into that, so they put it first, and then here on if you pull up your Peacock, and I don't know about the DVD, but if you fired your streaming service, you're going to see Bop Gun last, which was the last one to be filmed.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but it ended up airing first. But then, yeah, almost immediately, if you watch this one first, or if you saw it back in 1994, you're seeing a transition of a lot about who these characters are, but also transition from the case itself to, in the Robin Williams of it all, the victim. And that's purposeful, I think, to sort of highlight his abilities and his talents. But it was just sort of a pretty stark difference between what we got in season one and then to go, if you start with that episode immediately into that about more of a character focus about a victim.
Yeah, but see, like that was interesting. That was distinctive, and quite a good episode overall. Maybe
Hmm.
the strongest episode of this season, in my opinion, overall.
Very much so.
Not
Yeah.
not just from Robin Williams, but I don't know the overall story, the performances from our main characters who are in it. So this is another thing I have gripes. I think I do, broadly speaking, disagree with the main notes that the executives
Hmm.
made and kind of pushed on them because by focusing on fewer storylines per episode, it means you don't always get all of the characters in every episode. Not
Right.
really. Or they find ways to kind of put them in the margins that don't necessarily make sense. Whereas in the first season, this is part of why there were so many storylines, is if you think about it, actually, it was like you checked in with each pair of homicide detectives. What were they doing that week? And maybe things would intersect. Maybe they wouldn't. Maybe they would intersect later down the line, or maybe they wouldn't. And that's the other thing. When we start talking about season one of the things we praised about the show was in its structure.
Yeah.
And with these 4 episodes of season two, it's entirely episodic. You could watch these in any order. I mean, other than the fact that two of them kind of form a two-parter,
Yeah.
but other than that, it doesn't matter. Yeah, you can put Bop Gun first. Doesn't matter.
Right.
There's no reason why it couldn't be first, and then the other ones after it, because there are, virtually. Well, I mean, there's the through line with Julia Margulies' character, who mentioned Linda, but she's also only in 2 episodes, right? So
Yeah.
it's not a huge amount of continuity from one episode to the other, not to the extent that we saw in season one.
Yeah, and I guess you can have some more flexibility when you do only have four episodes, as you pointed out. Two of them, which on your streaming service would be numbers one and two, See No Evil and Black and Blue, follow a police shooting, and so there is some transition there that where those have to be sequential in terms of that order. But yeah, you can almost, as you said, put in these four in any kind of order. But as you said, I do sort of appreciate the idea of yeah, let's put this interesting story, look at who's on our show first, which is what they ended up doing. So probably a correct decision back in 1994. But then, yeah, it just sort of feels, I don't know, not that it feels out of place. It just feels, oh, you waited this long to do this with Robin Williams. Is it not too much of a complaint there? But Bob Gunn, I think, is traditionally and historically thought of as to be one of the best or two best episodes of the entire first two seasons of this
Yeah,
show.
which I think is fair. And honestly,
Yeah.
thankfully, the other episodes of the season I also thought were good, except for the
Yes.
first one.
Hmm.
See No Evil.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
didn't like it at all. I thought it was bad.
I,
I
I,
I, I
after looking into the police shooting case and noticing that that story actually lifted directly from the book, like, okay, it's sort of an interesting take on a real life event. I did not like the Wilford Brimley part of that
no,
episode at all.
no. The
And
whole Wilford Brimley assisted suicide part just
yeah.
felt like this ham-fisted way to put a controversial topic into the world in the early 1990s. I remember this was the exact time period when Jack Kevorkian was going on 60 Minutes and stuff like
Hmm.
that, and the issue was entering the public consciousness in a meaningful way. And I mean, it's still a pertinent issue. They passed laws in various places that allow for what they call death with dignity, or they call it a death with dignity act. Certainly not every state. It's an ongoing issue, an interesting enough one, but the way that they did it just felt very. It was the first time watching the show. It's like I'm watching a '90s show for sure.
Yeah.
'90s show
And
does politics,
I
you
guess
know.
it should also be noted here because I completely agree with you is that we've now talked about one episode that starred Robin Williams, now a second episode that had Wilford Brimley. Now, these are, and we had this discussion in season one, these are true guest stars. So this is now established enough that it has guest stars on it. We're going to talk about some other people that appear in this season that become famous, but are not necessarily guest stars yet. But I don't know if
Yeah.
it's a ratings thing or just people actually, well, this is an Emmy nominated. This is actually a really creative, good show to be on. But yeah, it sort of became a destination for a few people to star on it.
I'm sure they wanted to get, you know, Robin Williams and Wilford Brimley in relation to ratings,
Yeah,
But
yeah.
of course, also they're good actors. It's part of why it's so unfortunate to me that I feel like this is almost like Wilford Brimley's like worst performance or something. I don't know. I
Yeah,
really,
yeah.
really thought it was just, and then also the fact that when I say ham-fisted, it's all based on how Wilford Brimley's character's son is the friend of what's
Bo,
the name of the cop? Bo, I think is
Bo,
his
yeah,
name. Baldwin, the guy
yeah. That's his
Baldwin
first
plays.
name. Yeah,
And it was like we've never
Felton,
seen
Bo
this guy
Felton.
before. I don't have any idea
Exactly.
who this guy is, you know. And then with the police involved shooting, I think particularly in that episode, what was bothering me is the main tension becomes between Pembleton and well, the lieutenant. They generally call G,
I
Giardelli,
think Giorgello. Yeah,
Giardello. But anyway, and it was just like this is too much. This is too melodramatic, particularly in terms of the lieutenant's performance. Everything just felt overblown and melodramatic. And then in the same episode, you have our friend Bolander, who's always been, kind of kind of sweet, bumbling guy you kind of like. And for some reason, he is like super against talking to the woman
yeah,
for the sensitivity training, just kind of out of nowhere and being a real dick about it. And then Munch
yeah.
is just like monologuing to himself about how no one loves him and the world's. And I was like, this is just
I
all over the
found
place bad.
all season. I found the Munch stuff. Yeah, to be a little. It started to get a little annoying towards the end because he just sort of is one note all season in terms of that regard. Bolander is unwilling to talk to a therapist because his ex-wife wasted $7,000, he said, on therapists and then left him anyways. So he eventually gets some, not necessarily redemption, but some an upswing in his life in the last couple of episodes. But yeah, the whole Munch thing, I prefer the interaction between the characters and what they're talking about, disagreeing about, discussing, as opposed to Munch just complaining the whole season. That's what it seemed like to me.
Yeah, he's just complaining about Felicia the whole season,
Yeah,
who was mentioned in the first season.
yeah,
We've never seen her.
nope.
Which I do. I almost appreciate that as a running gag too. Like, I hope we never see Felicia
Yeah,
ever. Theoretically, she exists, but so it wasn't terrible. I mean, the thing is, ultimately, so okay, I got through that episode and I continued, and now in retrospect, I'm willing to say, well, that one was just a bit of a clunker, and
hmm
shows are allowed to have clunkers here or there, right?
yeah,
Particularly when you're
yeah,
talking about a show like this from the early mid 1990s. Not every episode is going to be good. We got 22 episode seasons after this. I'm sure there are some clunkers mixed in there. It was just
yeah.
particularly striking that it was the first episode I watched of the second season, knowing what I'd read about what the networks had demanded they change and so on. I was like really worried really fast. But even by the second episode, I started to feel a little bit better. What about you?
Yeah, I'd say I felt exactly the same, and it does make some sense to say, okay, let's stack on our first two episodes back when we aired it in '94, our two big guest stars we're going to have this season. But then, yeah, as they start investigating the police shooting, and really in the second episode, Black and Blue, that shows up on the service, and they start looking at sort of this conflict between Pembleton Bayless and the lieutenant, how they're going to solve that. Yeah, we're really started getting back into the interaction and conflict between the detectives, between their superiors, between the things they have to solve, how the methods by which they solve them. Yeah, so on the service, episodes two and three, I think really started an upswing again.
Yeah. And I mean, I think really Andre Brower saves the second episode.
Yep.
Um, because I was just saying in the first episode, the tension between him and Lieutenant, it was like, this feels like a bit much,
Yeah.
But you can see what they're doing and saying, oh, well, you're investigating the cops, but they're the cops, right? We're supposed to be on the same
Yeah.
side, that whole thin blue line kind of thing that's at
Hmm.
play. And it doesn't feel like it was working terribly well. But when you get into the culmination of that in terms of Pembleton, um, kind of, I don't know, breaking in a certain way because he's being told by a superior officer who's also a black man that he needs to, right, like Martin Luther King Jr. is invoked and he needs to decide what side he's on or whatever. And so he
Yes.
says, okay, I'll get you your confession. Then he goes in and coerces a false confession out of
Yeah.
that young man and then hands it to his lieutenant. Like that was the powerful scene that I thought really saved the episode.
Yeah, this scene between Andre Brower and Pimbleton and then Isaiah Washington, who would become much more
Yeah.
famous later after this episode, that confrontation, I mean, made me think of Three Men and Adina, made me think of just sort of these famous, yeah, these interrogation scenes. But man, that was if you're going to go to those lengths to sort of let Pimbleton do that to prove a point, man, it worked well for me. But yeah, I mean, it was sort of night and day between episode one and episode two in that regard.
Yeah. And precisely like we can think back to that episode from season one, Three Men and Adina. In that scenario, Pembleton believed, I think
Hmm.
he believed the guy was guilty,
Yeah,
but was still, well, you got to do this right. You got
yeah,
to do it right,
yeah,
But here, that he's just kind of at his wit's end and decides to sort of prove a point, I guess, that he's willing to just get this young man to just destroy him emotionally and
exactly,
get the false
exactly.
confession. And of course, things like this do happen in the world, so that's one reason
Yeah,
to have it in the episode. But then that works in terms of ultimately getting Giardello to tear up that confession and go
yeah,
after the real killer who was the cop, you know.
yeah. And Pimbleton is able to pretty quickly uh, get to the bottom of which police officer it was that ultimately pulled the trigger that killed the young drug dealer. So yeah, it was just sort of this. You have to climb this mountain to get there. Um,
But then in
but
in
just to close that out, just to think, okay, well, what we have heard is that this was exactly how it happened. This was a story directly from the book as he followed these homicide detectives. That makes it even more compelling.
did you read that the false confession was also part of the true story?
Not that specifically,
Okay.
but just that entire storyline was. So I'm making an assumption here, but that this story was lifted out of book, out of a context of what actually happened.
Interesting. Yeah, I'd be curious about the false confession part in
Yeah.
particular, but um what I was going to say is, then just kind of drop that. We move on to other stories, you know.
Hmm.
Whereas from season one, I might have felt more like it would linger in the background a bit more, or
Yeah.
something like this, because there is a point there. There is the tension you provoke in terms of truly investigating and arresting a police officer for killing someone.
Yep.
That's not the end of the story in the real world, right? Um, but I don't know. I haven't watched beyond this. Maybe in season three, it does come up again. It's possible. Maybe with the longer season orders, they're able to
Hmm.
get back to some of that more serial
Yeah.
kind of stuff and play with it more.
And maybe, and even symmetrically, no mention of Adina Watson in this season. Her name is on the murder board. You see Bayless writing,
Yeah,
and it's there, but no mention of her or her case, which took up so many episodes from season one.
yeah, yeah. I mean, there's something of an illusion to it. I didn't love the whole storyline with the BDSM club and the leather belts
Yeah.
and Bayless being really prudish about everything. I didn't love that. Didn't
Yeah.
love that about what they did with his character, I guess. I mean, I suppose it fits. It's not like there's anything from season one that would make me think he was more open-minded about, sexual kinks and so on. But
Yeah.
he was
Yeah.
really like, kinks are wrong. Kink, anything kinky at all is immoral, Templeton. No kinks, only
That
missionary
that was that was a
procreation.
weird that was
I
a
was like,
weird
what?
path to take. Yeah, that was very weird.
Sex, love. It's like, okay, man. All
Yeah,
right, dude. But at the same time, I did enjoy that storyline. Man, Andre Braugher is just great. But
yes.
Pendleton and the way that he handles everything through that storyline, he's just cool as a cucumber. You
Hmm.
know, like they go in the shop and the woman's like, "Are you married? Wouldn't your wife look good in this?" Yeah, she would indeed.
Yeah,
Hilarious. Yeah. Um. So overall, I did enjoy the season, but man, I
yeah.
was worried with the first episode.
Yeah, maybe it's
Um,
good that it ended on a high note. We can circle back to Bop Gun here. We have this last episode. Is it now? We'll trail into as you mentioned, a full third season. Um, this episode would be sort of famously we can revisit it as being directed by Stephen Gyllenhaal, who had a 13-year-old son named Jake, who is a character in this episode as Robin Williams' son. Barely any lines, but just interesting sort of first few things in his career. But yeah, a lot of faces and names that you might recognize that show up this season.
yeah, quite a young Jake Gyllenhaal. He
Yeah,
doesn't get to do much.
no,
Yeah. He doesn't do much other than be mad at his dad, kind of, and sad and cry. But I
yeah,
mean, he does fine. He's a kid, the kid.
yeah,
Um, and then we mentioned Juliana Margulies. We should say a little bit more about her character. She becomes a new love interest for Bolander.
yes. She plays the
Dr.
violin,
Blythe
and
is not
yes.
in season two.
No, not at all. They went on some dates. They apparently made a connection, but not here at all. And so yeah, Bolander turns his attention to a violin playing waitress named Linda, played by Juliana
Yeah.
Margulies.
And I think it's interesting because I tried looking into this, like, why isn't Dr. Blythe in season two? She's kind of like the only main
Hmm.
character who's in the first season and not the second season. If you even can call her a main character in the first season. I don't know if she's quite a
Yeah,
main character. But the best I can tell just from poking around a little bit, it seems like Wendy Hughes was just busy doing other stuff and wasn't under contract to continue on the show.
interesting.
That's the
And
best I can tell because she's got a
yeah,
credit on Star Trek The Next Generation in 1993. She's Australian. She goes back to Australia and does 52 episodes of some show that starts in 1994. Um, but part of what I think is interesting about that, just in terms of the history of television, I don't know all the behind the scenes details, but it kind of reads to me as though the writers of Homicide were saying, we want Bolander to have a love interest.
hmm
So if Wendy Hughes left for professional reasons because she was filming other things and they lost her character, did they then respond by creating the Linda character,
yeah,
casting Juliana Margu Margulis?
yeah.
It doesn't look like it sounds. It's one of those.
Is
Um,
it Margulis or Margulies?
See, I don't
I
know.
don't know.
I
We
don't
know
know.
they know who we're talking about.
We know. Everyone knows what we're talking about. Come on. But anyway, who goes on to do ER right after this.
Yes. So 8 months
And
later, she's going to become one of the most famous actresses in the world as a star of ER. And I've not watched season three, but I can only presume she is not in season three of Homicide: Life on the Street because she is now fully entrenched in ER, which begins in September of '94.
yeah, I haven't watched season three either, but something I was looking at, whether it was IMDb or Wikipedia or something, listed the credit as Homicide: Life on the Street, 2 episodes.
So yeah, yeah,
So, but again, I'm speculating. I don't know this for sure, and I'm not sure how to verify it exactly, but it kind of reads to me as though we got Wendy Hughes isn't in the show.
yeah,
They create the character of Linda. They cast Juliana Margulis. Damn it. And that this kind of launches her career. It seems
yeah,
like there's every chance
yeah.
that because of how well she does in this show, she gets the role in ER and boom, and
Yeah.
then later The Good Wife, of course, also
Yeah, so these episodes
amongst other
all
credits.
filmed in the summer of 1993, aired in January of '94. And so in that span in between the filming of this, the airing of it, and the casting of ER, I think NBC folks notice her in this show. She is cast, she's put in, opposite George Clooney and all these folks on the first season of ER. And yeah, just skyrockets from there.
Yeah. And again, I don't think we know the details for sure that that's exactly how it happened, but certainly how it
Yeah.
seems like it happened. And good for her. I enjoy Juliana Margulis. I have zero confidence that I've said her name right once at this point. I'm just like but I'm a. You ever watch The Good Wife? I quite enjoy The Good Wife. If you
No,
haven't seen it,
I've
you should
never
check it
seen
out.
The Good Wife. That's right.
Yeah,
She had two long standing, very popular shows. I mean, that's her whole career, basically. It's awesome.
yeah. I mean, other stuff in between. She's briefly in The Sopranos, and
Yeah.
of course she has some other credits. But yeah, I mean, I'm not sure how many years it was on ER, but quite a few, and then 7 years on The Good Wife.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
those are big credits there.
So
Um,
Top Gun, at least if you're, we're watching it in the order that it appears, also is the final appearance of Detective Steve Crosetti. There was some apparently not so great things behind the scenes with John Polito, who's the actor, and NBC. He didn't appreciate this. He was one of these characters that you didn't see much in season two. His role was really diminished. Apparently, this has been reported. This is not speculation. It was reported that NBC executives told him he needed to do some things about his appearance, and so he said, I'm done with this. And so after season two, we don't see him anymore. Crosetti gone after just 13 episodes.
yeah, which is a bummer. And one thing we didn't quite hit on when we were talking about behind the scenes stuff is apparently this was a very stressful 4 episodes for everyone for
Yes,
various reasons.
yes.
So it was like the vibes on the set were horrendous.
Yeah,
Stressing your hair.
you're acting for your life, you're acting for your job, you're acting to keep the show on. NBC sort of was convinced by the awards and by some of the critical acclaim of the show to keep it on, but okay, we're just going to give you four to see how you really do this time, and then we'll decide on a third season. And yeah, just the pressure that would put all these people on, and everyone in the whole production, I can't even imagine.
Yeah, indeed. But it is
Yeah,
true also that he and Lewis, Clark Johnson, they aren't in season two all that much. They're in season one quite a bit. But again, season
yeah.
one kind of hits on every pair of detectives in each episode as I think back on it. Um, so I'm curious to see what they do with Lewis and moving forward.
Yeah, does he get a
Clark
new
Johnson stays on the
partner?
show, I presume.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Even the one, I would say, real dramatic, important scene where Lewis goes on the roof and saves the pen collector guy from committing suicide. Corsetti's nowhere near there. He's not around. It's Lewis that goes up and does it. So he's not
hmm
been in that scene. So I think there was some real, like,
Yeah,
we're push you to the side type of things happening there.
yeah. They did get that storyline. You're
Yeah.
reminding me. I was thinking, and then the only other one I remember, I just watched this 2 nights ago. The only other one I remember is the Wilford Brimley, the
Yeah.
assistant suicide thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and that was another instance in that first episode where I felt like, I thought Lewis was cooler than this. He's all, oh no, it's a murder. Not allowed
Yeah.
to do that. You know, fine, fair enough. Anyway, enough crap on him. You want to talk about NYPD Blue a little bit
Yeah,
because
I did want to bring this up because I think it's important in terms of what happens in the future of this show. So, Homicide: Life on the Street is created as sort of this darker, more bleak, more realistic look at homicide detectives, sort of the other side of the spectrum from Law and Order, which we talked about and some in the first season. So, first season of Homicide: Life on the Street airs in the spring of '93. In the fall of '93, ABC introduces NYPD Blue, which, for those that don't remember this show, was very cutting edge, tremendously high audience,
you
very
saw his
popular
butt.
for what's that?
You saw his butt.
Yeah. So, and
Remember
this
when
was
that
the
was like a
thing.
huge deal? It's like, oh my God, there's a butt on TV.
Yes. So it had incredibly high ratings for its first few years because of nudity and language. I mean, that's what people had said. This show that sort of was pushing the boundaries of what you could do in network television with these two things. So that show airs in the fall of '93. Then here comes Homicide: Life in the Street back again in January of '94. So there's natural comparisons. Oh, well, how are we supposed to get the audience that NYPD Blue has? This show is sort of its spiritual opposite in terms of the way that we do it. And so it sort of became this rivalry between these shows of, well, if all you care about is a show that'll give you nudity and language, then go watch NYPD Blue. If you care about an actual good story and something that'll hook you in terms of the things that can be discovered in depth of these type of murder investigations, you want Homicide: Life on the Street. And so there was sort of this rivalry that existed, and so many people, I think, said actually, in terms of story, in terms of production, in terms of what this show can be, Homicide: Life on the Street is so much better. Critics were saying this. That helped the executives make the decision to give a full order to a season three in the fall of '94.
Yeah, really interesting stuff.
Yeah,
I've still never really watched NYPD Blue. Have
nor
you?
nor have I.
I mean, to the young people out there, when this
Yeah.
show came out, Ryan and I were what, like 13, 14 years old,
Oh yeah, we were trying to
and
watch it. Yeah.
it's too edgy.
Yeah.
You can't watch that show. There's a naked butt.
Yeah. This is the one the parents were telling their kids they couldn't watch. Yeah, this was the one.
That's how far have we come. And the language thing too. I kind of forgot about the language thing.
Yeah.
It was really pushing the edge of, and at the time it was like, oh my God, you can say bitch on television.
Exactly.
Ooh,
Exactly.
scandal.
Oh, this is a 10 p.m. Eastern show because this is a bitch and showed a butt. Yeah.
You son of a bitch. um,
Yeah. So in a way, they both helped each other.
yeah,
Season two of Homicide would get one Emmy nomination for Robin Williams as a guest star. He would not win, but still critics loved it and really helped push this towards I think 20 or 22 episodes that we're going to get in season three.
right. Which is the thing is, like, that's kind of the standard order for
Mhm.
a show in the 1990s, that all sorts of shows have 7 seasons of 22 episodes apiece. That was like standard contracts. And as I understand it, generally, part of the reason is that the actors would sign 7-year contracts at the beginning. So if the show didn't get canceled, like Star Trek The Next Generation, famously,
Yeah.
Patrick Stewart thought it was going to get canceled and lived out of his suitcase because he was prepared for it just to be canceled, but it wasn't. And then, well, now it's 7 seasons, right? So I don't know. Maybe it's the same here. Maybe they all did sign those 7-year contracts at the
Yeah.
beginning, but then they weren't getting full season orders at the beginning.
Right.
And
Right. I
but
was trying to
then
think if I've ever heard of or can recall another, obviously we see 4, 6, 8, 10 episode seasons all the time, but back then, did we have, if it wasn't a mini series, did we have a series that would have a season this short? I just can't recall anything like that.
yeah, no, there's some stuff like this. The first season of Twin Peaks is only it's 8 episodes if you
Mhm.
include the pilot. So we'll say 8. And then there's all the stuff about how you number those episodes. We've hit on that before. Um, and then after that, shorter first season, the second season is 22 episodes,
Got it. Okay.
and then it was canceled. So I mean, there is some of that kind of stuff. That's the only one off the top of my head I can think of that feels
Yeah.
similar to where it was like we're giving you an abbreviated first season, then we'll see. And then Homicide here seems particularly wonky, where they said, okay, well, the first season, the critics love it, but people aren't watching it enough.
Yeah. Yeah.
Here's this super abbreviated second season, and then they're convinced to give it full season orders. So
Yeah.
I guess. Anything else you want to hit on here with season two?
Just one final story that I read one place I thought was interesting, which was, we mentioned that this second season aired in January during a hiatus for LA Law. And apparently, because of the first episode with Robin Williams and the executives trying to, give it this push, see if people wanted it, got a lot of publicity, a lot of advertising, and that didn't make Corbin Burnson very happy, who was a star of LA Law. And he apparently confronted some of the people that were stars on Homicide, saying that they were trying to take over his show and trying to take over their time slot and all this. So I just found that funny that during their hiatus, he thought that there was a coup happening amongst the NBC shows and was not a fan of that. So really made some enemies there, but both ended up surviving for quite a while.
Yeah, it's funny. Is LA Law on the Peacock?
I
I
don't
mean,
know. I haven't looked.
I feel like no one watches LA Law. No, here we are 30 years later. This is what you made me start thinking about, right? 30 years later, LA Law, it feels like people don't talk about it, people
Yeah.
don't watch it, people don't remember it as the greatest show of its era. But at the time, like Twin Peaks never won an Emmy. You know who you know what show
Yep.
it lost to? LA Law.
Well, okay.
Yeah, and so it's like, okay, all right. But yeah, I'm curious. I have no idea if LA Law is even good
I have
in
no idea.
retrospect,
Yeah.
you know? Um, I know I saw it here or there when it was on 30 years ago, but
Yeah,
anyhow,
that's all I had. I mean, lot of interesting information about there about a four episode season. But basically from here we're off. I don't think we're gonna go into the subsequent seasons, but three, four, five, six, seven, we're gonna get full orders and it becomes one of the most critically acclaimed shows that's ever been on network TV.
yeah, I was going to say, I've really enjoyed talking about Homicide: Life on the Street with you, Ryan, working through season one and season two, and I've been enjoying the show, and there's a
Yeah.
decent chance I'll probably keep watching the show. We're not going to become a recurring Homicide: Life on the Street podcast for months and
No.
months and months. We're going to leave it behind after this week, but I'm probably going to keep watching it. And if you also keep watching it, I don't know, maybe we'll find time in the future to hit on
Yeah.
some things, or at some point next year when we have a week where we don't know what to do, we could talk about it, or who knows. But they're 22 episode seasons. We're definitely not going to watch 22 episodes by next week, right?
Definitely not.
That's not happening. So what we are going to do next week is commemorate the 20th anniversary of the debut of Lost. We're fans of Lost on this podcast, and you should be too. And the ending was good, and we don't want to hear it. But
That's right.
they debuted. No, sick of
That's what we're gonna do. We're gonna spend 55 minutes criticizing people who don't like the end of Lost next week.
yes, that's what we're gonna do. Just endlessly, pull up comments for people and tell them why they're wrong. No, I don't think that's exactly what we're gonna do. We'll have to talk a little bit more off there about exactly what we're gonna do. But it's the 20th anniversary of the debut of the pilot of Lost on September 22nd. So we'll go ahead and record on Friday as per usual next week. That's the 20th. We're right close to it anyway. Um, there's also a book coming out from
Yep. And a
Noah
documentary
and a
coming out.
documentary. I think there might have been a couple documentaries, but there's a book from Noah Murray and Emily St. James. I think it comes out next week to mark
Oh, okay. Yep.
the anniversary. It could be an interesting read, but we're not going to have time to read it before the podcast.
No.
But so anyway,
If you haven't watched Lost and want to power through six seasons and 140 something episodes, we'll be there waiting for you a week from now.
yeah. I mean, next week's podcast is probably for people who have seen Lost or
Yes.
people who
Yes.
haven't seen Lost and are willing to hear some discussion on Lost that may well involve some spoilers that might
Yeah.
inspire you to watch Lost. It's a pretty great show. Came
But
out
I
20
imagine
years.
we'll talk a lot about the impact of Lost on television. That's appropriate for anyone, whether you've seen it or not.
The fact that it came out 20 years ago makes me feel old.
Me too. Me too.
That's not fun. Anyhow, it'll be a fun podcast next week. Hopefully you join us. Thanks for listening. As always, if you've enjoyed the podcast, please do leave a good rating, leave a review wherever you're listening, and so on. If you're on YouTube, hit that thumbs up, hit the subscribe button to the YouTube channel. You can follow TV Obsessive on social media. Search for TV Obsessive. We're still on X. We're on Facebook. There's an Instagram account. There's a Threads. Blue Sky is the only social media service at this point that I personally actively use,
Yeah.
for fun. Fun. Social media is fun. Remember that? It's supposed to be fun.
That's right.
So anyway, there's a TV Obsessive Blue Sky account. You want to check that out. Recently, I won't spend too long on this, but are you aware they shut down X in Brazil?
Yes. Yes.
And
I'm aware of this.
so in the past week or whatever, millions of Brazilian accounts created on Blue Sky. The Brazilians love the Blue Sky. They've chosen Blue Sky over Threads. Anyhow, I think that about does it. See you next week.
Yeah. Looking forward to it.